Hi guys, my name is Elin, and we are continuing our conversation and answering the question, how do we stay connected in our marriage? And we're going to be talking about emotional needs in this video, but if you didn't get a chance to watch the other two videos, make sure that you do that before you watch this one on emotional needs. So if that's you, go ahead and pause and go click back to those other videos and watch those first. All right, so in this video, we're going to be talking about meeting the emotional needs of each other in our marriage. And this is a really important conversation and something that we see suffer in marriages, especially as you start adding life, kids and finances and work and all of the things. It seems like the very first place that we start to kind of pull away from is each other. And it's really super unfortunate. And it's definitely not what God wants for us. Because remember, we as a husband and wife, as husbands and wives, as Christians, we are to be the example for the world of what God's love looks like. And it's sacrificial, it's one that sacrifices, and it's one that serves. And it's one that is joyful. And God wants to see your marriage joyful and you enjoying each other. And our emotional needs are a really important component of that. And one of the things, just being honest with you, that was really difficult in that season with Tab and me, was that we both felt like we were just pouring ourselves out for everyone, our family, our children, at work, at home, and each other. And when you get to the point where you're feeling really depleted, you actually kind of forget that the other person, your husband or your wife, might be feeling the same way. And I alluded to this in the first video, that we kind of tend to get that human selfishness. It rears its ugly head. And usually it does that in the comfort of our home where we're most comfortable with our spouse. And it's really the last place that it should happen. We should be treating each other better than we treat anybody else. And we should really be and feel convicted that it's that important. And I remember, I told you that Tab and I sat across the table from each other in those weekly meetings. And this was one of the more difficult meetings that we had, because this is talking about needs that we individually felt. And gosh, sometimes it's like, where do you even begin? Because I have so many needs that I might be feeling that he's not meeting in that moment. And it's like, where do I even start? And I had shared also that we kind of felt like we were ships passing in the night. And the danger in that is that, you get married and you love each other and you're talking and it's amazing and you are each other's number one priority, and that it's like the future is like just so bright and it's amazing, and then for different reasons that kind of starts to wane. And then when life comes into play, one of the first things we start doing is we start closing off and we stop sharing, and then resentment grows, and then before you know it, there's a wedge between you and the number one person. The number one human relationship that we're supposed to have if we're married is with our spouse, and that suffers. And so Tab and I, in one of our meetings, it was actually our second meeting, we came to the table with some very specific needs that we had from each other. And I'll tell you, I will never forget it. This was over a decade ago, and I will never forget the conversation. Now, understand that Tab and I were in a place where we only could bring to the table one need, because the needs were kind of growing and growing and growing, and it felt like it would be overwhelming if we came to the table saying, I need this, and I need that, I need this, and I need that. So we decided that we were going to come to the table that night with one need, like the most important need that we had, and we were going to share it with the other person. And the only rule was, when you were sharing, you shared your need with no accusing or any kind of, let me just hash out some problems here or frustrations I have with you. It was none of that. So as the sharer, you were just literally saying, this is what I need. And then the other rule was that when you were the one who was listening, and this was so hard, you guys, we were not allowed to respond with any kind of rebuttal, any kind of excuse, any arguing, nothing. This was an opportunity for each of us to be heard and to listen. So as the person who was listening, what we would do is we would respond and say, okay, what I understand you saying is this, or what I heard you say is this, just to make sure we were clear. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that with your marriage in just a minute. But I will never forget what we both shared, and it kind of blew my mind. Tab sat down and he went first, and he said, Elin, I need for you to ask me how football practice was. And my husband's a football coach. And I was I did not expect that. Like, out of all the things that he needed most from me was that I would ask him how football practice was, not even his whole day, just football practice. And my one need to him was, Tab, I just need you to say thank you. If you ever see me doing anything that is helpful to you, to our family, to our daughter, we only had one daughter at the time, any of that, if you see anything that you catch me doing that could be a thank you, please say thank you. I just need to hear thank you. And I couldn't believe that our needs were so basic and so simple. And maybe you're in the same place that Tab and I were in, where you're like, oh my gosh, I have so many needs. And so in this time, in just a few moments, when you actually share with each other, you may want to just share one need. Like, what's the basic need? What's the one thing that you need right now that if your spouse were to meet that need, it would make everything so much better? And maybe you're actually doing great. I hope you are, by the way. I hope your marriage is amazing and that you are in an incredible season right now. But let me tell you something. That is when sharing emotional needs might be the most important, is when things are going well. Because if you get in this practice now, then when times are difficult, you'll already be having this dialogue and you can share more freely. Tab and I actually look at this emotional needs kind of as a bank account, where it's an emotional bank account. And we would start the conversation, beyond that one night, as we continued through our marriage, as we continue through our marriage, it kind of sounds more like this. How is your emotional bank account? And what we mean by that is, am I, as your spouse, am I withdrawing more than I'm depositing? And if I am, what deposits do you need from me? Because the truth is we assume way too often that the other person is reading our minds. Women, we are the worst at this. We assume that our husbands know exactly what we need. And really, that's not fair. That's not fair at all. The only person who knows what we need is the Lord. That's the only one. And so we can't assume that our husbands, no matter how long or short we've been married, no matter how much we feel loved by them or not, we can never assume, it's not fair to them to assume that they understand exactly what we need. And so this conversation really, really helps to kind of break that ice and take away those expectations of mind reading and say, no, let me tell you what I really need. And I want to encourage you with a verse that really helps me whenever I kind of feel overwhelmed. And that is in Zechariah 4:10. Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. Listen, if you are only able to share one need right now because it's just too overwhelming and there's too much tension in your marriage, the Lord is rejoicing right now. I believe it. Rejoicing right now that you two care about your marriage so much that you're willing to sit and watch a video, to have a conversation, to share things that may make you feel vulnerable or may be uncomfortable for you. Maybe you're not comfortable about expressing what you need and you're taking a step of faith in this. I just want you to know that the Lord loves your marriage and he is so pleased to see the work begin. So if you have a whole lot of stuff you need to work through in your marriage, be encouraged to know that the Lord is pleased with you and he's going to bless you by taking these steps to have this conversation with each other. Okay, so now it's going to be your turn to practice this. But before you do, I just want to talk about a few things, kind of set some expectations so that this goes really well for you right now. The first thing to remember when you guys are about to share is it's really, really important. Okay, hear me on this, that this is not a time of blaming. This is not a time where we're saying things like, you do this, or you always do that, or you never do this. This is not a time for that. This is actually a time for us individually to share how I feel. My emotional bank account feels depleted when fill in the blank. Or my emotional bank account feels full when you blank. Or it's really encouraging to me when I hear you say blank. Or it's really hard for me, or it hurts my feelings, or it makes me feel discouraged when. So when we're the ones who are sharing, it's really important that we aren't blaming. This is not a time of blaming. This is a time of sharing. Okay, so it's really important that as you share, when it's your turn, that you really choose your words carefully and with love. And we're going to actually have some of these phrases and prompts posted for you on the screen so that it will help you as you kind of practice this conversation. Okay, so the second thing I want you to remember is that when you're listening, and I just talked about this just briefly, but I really want to make sure that before you practice this, that you really take these things to heart. And the second part of that is that when you're listening, that you do not make excuses. Oh, and this is the hardest part, you guys. This is the hardest part, especially if you know, hey, I'm doing the best I can. Like, oh, he wants me to ask him how football practice was. Well, he doesn't know. Like the hard day that I've just had, or what's going on at work, or the fact that the kids have been needing me all the time and I'm just trying to get food on the table. He's not thinking about that. I want all of those thoughts to be literally thrown in the garbage can right now. All of that, because this is not about proving ourselves. This is about uniting together. Remember, we have a common enemy and it's not each other. Remember that, right? From video 1. So right now, you guys are unified. You are partners. You are linking arms. You are on the same side. And your purpose is to have the marriage that you want and that God wants for you. That's what you really want. Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to this. And so when you are listening and receiving from the other person what their need is, it's very important that you listen, that you don't make any rolling of your eyes, that you don't bite your lip. I mean, you may need to bite your lip, but don't do it in a way that your spouse notices. You don't need to rebuttal or make excuses or get angry or huff or all the things that we all do when we get defensive. Even if there's a reason for that, right now is not the time. Okay, this is really important. Both partners need to be committed to this part. Okay, that you're really going to listen. You're going to have eye contact the entire time. And as an active listener, okay, there's a difference between hearing something and actually listening. As an active listener, when it's your turn to listen, after your spouse has shared with you what he or she needs, however many things that may be, respond with things and words like, okay, what I hear you saying is, you need me to ask you how football practice was. Right? Or what I understood you to say was, when you get home from football, you want me to ask you how practice was. Is that right? Now, this may seem so silly. Why would you ask that question? He just said it, or she just said it. Well, we don't have to be married for very long to know that things get lost in translation. Men and women are very different. It's part of the beauty of marriage, but it can also be a point of tension. And so we want this to be a great experience right now in this moment. So let's make sure that we remember these things as we're sharing. We're not blaming. We're taking ownership and using words like me and I. And let's make sure that as we are listening, that we are looking with loving eye contact, that we're listening, we're nodding, we're not having any kind of anything negative coming into that conversation, and that we're responding with, okay, what I understand you saying is this. All right, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to have the ladies, the wives, start first. So in just a moment, I'm going to have these prompts on the screen, just like we did before. We'll cut away for about a minute, and then I'll come back and have you guys switch. But I want you to share with your husbands right now what you need from him. It may just be one thing, and that's okay. It may be many things. And so go ahead and share that now. Men, listen. Listen to your wife. She is the daughter of God. Think if you have a daughter yourself, if your little girl was sharing her heart, how you would listen. Think of how you listen, to your bosses at work. Think of how you listen to your other family members. And right now, the most important human being to your life is sitting in front of you, right now. And as the leader of your home, you have the opportunity to set the tone on what active listening is going to look like for your marriage. And so take this minute, women, share lovingly. Husbands, listen lovingly and actively. And we'll be back in just a minute. Okay, now it's time to switch. So, husbands, it's your turn to share with your wives, and wives, it's your turn to actively and lovingly listen. You know, this is a really incredible moment you're about to step into because our society says that men, they're weak if they're vulnerable. They're weak if they have emotions. They're weak if they have needs. Guys, that's not true. That is absolutely not true. And there's no better place to exercise that vulnerability and to share those needs than in the safety of a marriage. And so husbands, I just want to encourage you to be vulnerable right now. Really share with your wife what it is you need. And wives, understand that you really ultimately hold your husband's heart in your hand right now. He may not tell you that, but your response is really going to indicate how this is going to go. So while that's not pressure, like I don't want you to feel discouraged by that. I actually want you to feel super encouraged by that, by the great power, wives, that you have to protect your husbands, to be the helper that he needs and the encourager that he needs. And right now he's about to share with you something that he needs, and you have more than anyone else in the whole world. You have the power and ability to meet those needs. So really listen carefully and look at this as like a real treasure for you to be able to have some information that you need in order to bless your husband and bless your marriage and bless your future together. All right. So you've shared your needs with each other, and I pray that it was a really special moment, an intimate moment, a powerful moment, and a really encouraging moment that you got to share together. And so just like with the last video, I shared that Tab and I implemented some homework when we were talking about appreciation, that we were going to appreciate each other every single day in some really intentional ways for an entire week. Well, we also did that with our emotional needs. And that looked exactly the same. We said we commit for one entire week to intentionally and daily meet each other's needs. So every single day that he got home from football practice, I would ask him, how was football practice? And I would wait and listen as long as he needed or as short as he needed to talk. And Tab did actually more work than I did. He was so thankful every day that week, telling me, showing me that he was so thankful for the different things that I was doing. And it just encouraged me so much and really changed some major things in our marriage. And again, we continued this practice today. And so for your homework, every day for the next 7 days, and my prayer is long beyond that, okay, but for the next 7 days, every single day, I want you to commit to one another that you are going to meet the needs that were just shared every single day. But here's the key. It has to be from a place of love, and there has to be no expectation in return. And you know what? That's hard sometimes. Even my request to Tab of, will you thank me for the things that I'm doing? You know, it could be like, well, why are you doing things to get, be thanked? Well, I wasn't doing things to be thanked. But it's really encouraging to know that what I'm doing matters to my husband. So that's kind of the heart with which I was sharing with him. And so the expectation that you're doing when you're sharing or when you're meeting those needs for your spouse this next week, it needs to be nothing other than to bless your spouse. If that's your only intention and you expect nothing in return, I believe that some supernatural, incredible blessings are about to happen in your marriage. I really, truly believe that because I wouldn't be here. My marriage may not either if it weren't for the supernatural blessing and hand of God on my marriage as we were trying to make it better by meeting each other's emotional needs. So this week, meet each other's emotional needs. And we will be back with another video to continue this conversation on how do we stay connected in our marriage.